Bhagat Singh is, I agree with you. What was I doing when I was 23? I am embarrassed to think that I had led 1/32nd of a life that Bhagat Singh had led at 23. But he comes from a quite vibrant family that's well connected, not only to the Arya Samaj in Punjab, in Lahore, through Lala Lajpat Rai and through his father, but also peasant movements and the Gadar Party. And so he actually spent, I mean, his formation, he writes quite extensively about his formation as an activist through his teenage years, and thinks quite seriously about what it means to become an activist at such an early age. And I think it's part of how do you say it? It's both. We're both fortunate to have someone like Bhagat Singh to have existed, and he was the excellent result of a number of different intersecting philosophies and projects and theories that were crisscrossing the world, that he happened to kind of really just be at the center of. Lahore, and Bhagat Singh is a Lahori. I mean, in Lahore was the center of these intersecting thoughts through the Dwarkadas Library and through the Arya Samaj and through Lala Lajpat Rai and through many others. Lahore was really the capital of the 1920s in some way. I've thought often about this juxtaposition between violence and non-violence, Malcolm X versus MLK Jr., Bhagat Singh versus Gandhi, and really, like I said before, I really think it's an unfair binary that emerges, right? I think Martin Luther King Jr. Really simplified Malcolm X's thought. Malcolm X was a much more sophisticated thinker about violence and nonviolence than he is made out to be. And similarly with Bhagat Singh, I think Bhagat Singh was a much more complicated thinker, much more sophisticated thinker about violence and nonviolence than Gandhi played him to be. And so in both cases, what has happened, as the narrative goes, seems to be that the nonviolent party uses the so-called violent party as a threat to co-opt a movement. So Bhagat Singh's legacy is somewhat tarnished by Gandhi's using him as a threat, when in fact Bhagat Singh didn't. That simply is not accurate to describe Bhagat Singh's philosophical imagination. To address this kind of, one of the reasons that I've been drawn to Bhagat Singh over and over again is precisely because he doesn't think about individuality. He does not think about anti-colonialism as a project of where one does it oneself, but he thinks about anti-colonialism as a collective endeavor. Right? One does it with others. One does it with others as equals. Right? There is no leader to the anti-colonial movement. One is a part of a project which is unfinished, and which one is not a leader, but one is a participant. And I think that's a really crucial way. That's a really crucial thing that Bhagat Singh offers us, as opposed to someone like Gandhi, who was truly a leader and thought of himself as a leader and had followers. Bhagat Singh wanted to be part of the mass. He wanted to be part of the collective. He wanted to be one with the people, I think, which is a much more egalitarian way of thinking politics. On Pakistan, I really appreciated the way you framed thinking about Bhagat Singh working for the subcontinent. And I like the way you framed that. I thought that was quite brilliant. I mean, he's a Lahori, but he's thinking about the British India. And I think, but just to add to it, I think that Bhagat Singh was thinking about the world. I think he was acting on behalf of the world. He was imagining not simply the abolishment of colonialism, but the abolishment of capitalism, the abolishment of racism, the abolishment of sexism. He wrote about all of these things. And the abolishment of communalism, of regionalism. I mean, he was a true cosmopolitan in that sense. And I think when we think about him as working for Pakistan, as working for India, I think we do him a great injustice. I think his imagination was the world. He wanted a revolution that would change the world, and in some ways would make life better for he was a generous thinker. He wanted to make life better for the Irish and the white working class in Britain, because the problem was that capitalism, colonialism, and racism and classism all worked together and all had to be abolished and all had to be rethought. And so he's not a regional thinker, he's a global thinker, and on many different levels. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. About Bhagat Singh in Pakistan, there are very few people who appear to be in their writings, in their actions, so selfless and so innocent at some deep, at an essential level. So he's a very likable character. If you read about him, generally, I mean, that's why he's loved across the board. Hindu fundamentalists love him, liberals love him, Sikhs love him, and anybody in Pakistan who reads about him ends up, I think, he's a difficult man to not like. His only shortcoming in Pakistan is his name. I think that he couldn't do much about. If he changed his name to I don't know, Bhagat Ali or some kind of try to appease those who are handling the ideology of Pakistan, then he would have been one of the most celebrated heroes of this land. So he is from this land, he is very likable, and I think it doesn't say much about him when we don't celebrate him, but says a lot about us and where we're heading as a society. So I think the loss is ours, not his. In fact, I remember a few years ago when there were these attempts to have the Shadman Chowk is where he was hanged. And there were attempts to declare that as Bhagat Singh Shaheed Chowk. This gentleman with the name of Khadim Hussain Rizvi sent some of his boys to attack those demonstrators. And that's actually the first time we found out about this gentleman. This is about 3-4 years ago. And now, of course, he's disrupted lives at a national level. So there is that kind of hate, and they knew nothing. I mean, I remember those people, they knew nothing about him. It was his only crime was his name. So how can a guy with this name be called a Shaheed? So yes, I think it is very important to bring him. That's why he's a very political figure in today's Pakistan. We must remember him. We must remember him. I think it's a political act to remember someone like Bhagat Singh, because he grew politically in Lahore. He was from Jadawala. He's from this region. He died way before partition. So it's only at our own peril that we refuse our own history, because this is our own history. And once you start refusing your own history, you start running from yourself. And once you start running from yourself, you become actually quite psychotic, whether at an individual level or at a social level, because you're afraid of your own self, your own past. So there's that about Bhagat. The other thing just I want to mention on violence, Bhagat Singh actually is interesting because the HRSA, the Hindustan Republican Socialist Army, they actually don't commit too many acts of violence other than the 2 or 3 famous ones that we know about. It's actually more about amplifying the violence of the colonial state. It's somehow the attempt was to have a committed group of activists who can challenge the state in such a way that it forces the state to be brutal And then these people will resist that brutality, basically turning their bodies into this national theater of the nation's suffering. The idea of a hunger strike inside a jail was that this is what Indians are going through. Indians are hungry, Indians are famished, Indians are tortured. And at the same time, to say that despite the fact that Indians are hungry, famished, tortured, Indians are refusing to give up. So it's also a site of resistance. So it was the theatrical side of Bhagat Singh is beautiful, whether and not just Bhagat Singh, the general anti-colonial movement has a lot to teach people about the theatrics of politics. And that's something that MLK also brings into his movement. I think that's a move that Gandhi, Bhagat Singh, MLK, Malcolm X, all of them have in common. The idea that you have to demonstrate your suffering and you have to demonstrate resistance to that suffering in a public spectacle. That's the kind of democratization of politics that then you see in America with the civil liberties movement. And of course, African Americans have a long history of learning from the anti-colonial movements in India. And there's a fantastic book actually out by Gyan Pandey on this intersection. So I think more than being a violent figure, it's about showing the violence of the state and society and the possibilities of resisting it by refusing to submit to that violence. I think we have time for one more round of questions.
Thank you. Daniel, would you agree with this, with the statement, Bhagat Singh as the greatest Indian ever?
Thank you. Ammar, you said something very interesting at the end of the last round. You said that probably he's a very likable figure. But I think the problem with likable figures is that they are also likely to be appropriated by everybody. I mean, if we look at what the Modi government is doing with some of the revolutionary figures in India, I mean, including Bhagat Singh and some of his comrades, not just Bhagat Singh, but Rajguru and Sukhdev. And I believe this is a similar. And also, we haven't talked about how he represented in popular culture, but there are not one film, but two other films which came out on Bhagat Singh, and they had an increasingly problematic relationship. Like one of the films I remember made him out to be a Sikh nationalist. So, I mean, they put him in conversation with Bhindranwale, the Golden Temple, and, and this is also something very problematic. And of course, this also tells you the way history is being written now, in the academy, postmodernism, if you like. And there is an uncomfortable parallel with Gramsci, because Gramsci is also being reappropriated in the European Academy as a somewhat lovable figure, as someone social democratic whom everyone can relate to. Especially the media theorists have really played havoc. So similarly, in this part of the world, Bhagat Singh, I mean, you said his name is also a problem, but also his name is a problem to many Sikh nationalists in India who say that, he is a Sikh. He's, forget about secularism, forget about anti-imperialism. He is actually a Sikh nationalist, and he is the precursor of many of these Khalistan movements, if you like. So I would like to draw both of your attention to the appropriation. I mean, you mentioned the word afterlives. So in an atmosphere of such right-wing compliance, how do we reappropriate these figures who are basically our figures, progressive figures, who had a clear attachment to a certain conception of anti-imperialism, socialism, secularism, and anti-capitalism? Thank you.
What really breaks my heart is that, we have made Muhammad bin Qasim, someone who existed 1200 years ago, a hero for our youth, symbol of our resistance against the British, our freedom. And we have forgotten Bhagat Singh, making a role model, Bhagat Singh a role model for our youth. How can we change that now, in the current perspective? When I look at Muhammad bin Qasim, I can't relate. Our culture is different, the time period is different. He has nothing to do with our freedom struggle. He was an outsider. But when I look at Bhagat Singh, I can relate. I can see that he belonged from my land, he had my culture, and the ideas were more modern, were more in the context of the current situation of our country. How can we change that? How we as youth can pressurize our government, the people like Khadim Rizvi, to, reapportion their approach on this topic? Yeah?
Is he not part of the government? That's just a scary part of this sentence. Like, how do we force people in government like Khalid Hussain and Steve? You can use it when
Well, he totally acts like as if he's a part of the government. So, yeah. If a person can, paralyze your whole economy, your whole country for like 20, 25 days, he is a part of the government.
You see, the question of is Bhagat Singh the greatest Indian ever is a bold question, and I am tempted to answer with a bold, equally bold answer, but I think I won't. I think I want to actually, for me, what's so important about recuperating, reappropriating Bhagat Singh's legacy is that he himself foregrounded the fact that he was not the greatest Indian ever, right? That he was one with the masses of India, and he was no better than any other Punjabi, any other Sikh, any other Indian, any other person in the world. That he was truly an equal to all, and I suppose following in his own logic and his own quite aggressive statements on this front. I'm tempted to say that he was, if he was the best Indian ever, he was best by arguing for his absolute equality with everyone else in the world, and the impossibility and the refusal of being the best, in that truly egalitarian sense. And I think that's one of the very important things about recuperating Bhagat Singh's legacy for the present is this sense that that the demands that we make in this moment of the rise of the right, the return of certain forms of oppressive state systems around the world, right, is not to replicate the logics of authority and authoritarianism, right? That's what we are being oppressed by, but to actually demand the logics of egalitarianism, the logics of solidarity with the masses, right? One seeks to not become the new authority, not become the new face, not simply change the face of authoritarianism to a different face, but actually to relinquish, to refuse to shirk the sensibilities of authoritarianism at all, and to really insist on egalitarianism in the present, democracy in the present, and freedom in the present.
Just briefly, yes, I think it's difficult to have space for someone like Bhagat Singh when your history starts with, exactly as you're saying, with Muhammad bin Qasim, and then Ghazni, Ghori, and then Sir Sayyid, the Mughals, Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, and then Iqbal, Jinnah, then we win the World Cup in '92, then Imran Khan, and now, who knows, maybe Khadim Hussain Rizi. So yeah, it's an embarrassingly bad way of remembering the past, and that's why, as I said, it's important to bring forth these figures who are repressed figures in our historical memory, and maybe we can do something big in Lahore on the 23rd of March to remember, because that's the day when he was hanged in Lahore, and there should be, I think, there should be something commemorating that act. And in terms of like afterlives and appropriation, I think that's so true. It's happened to all kinds of figures, and I think that's almost natural in politics that symbols get appropriated. I mean, Jinnah is appropriated by everybody on the political spectrum, from the left to the right. Now I saw a picture of Rizvi Saab with Jinnah as well. So Jinnah could be, this is what in social theory you call an empty signifier. The free-floating symbol would go where power is. And right now, of course, in India, in Pakistan, if the problem is that we're not remembering him, in India, the problem is in the way that they're remembering Bhagat Singh, and it's very much to further a Hindu nationalist agenda, which is very exclusive, which is very authoritarian, and And that's something that I think we were discussing in the previous session on Bhashani as well, and the way in which he's being appropriated today. But the cool thing about people like Bhagat Singh or Bhashani and many others is that it is not easy for authoritarian figures to actually appropriate these people. They create problems in their narratives all the time. So even while Bhagat Singh is being appropriated by someone like Modi, those who are fighting Modi are using Bhagat Singh's name to fight him, whether it's on the campuses of JNU or it's in other different movements against the current government. So there's always this revolutionary potentiality of these figures. A friend of ours, Chris Moffat, works on the ghost of Bhagat Singh. The idea that these figures, these important symbols, even once they leave the world, they return to haunt the present. And they continuously destabilize the certainties of the present and open up other kinds of possibilities. And his claim, and that's I think where we can end it, his claim is that Bhagat Singh, his life ended when he was 23, but his life as a political figure continues, and there's a lot more that's going to happen with and through Bhagat Singh. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nami.